Good morning, or depending on when you're listening to this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I was always told I had a voice for radio, so I've made a podcast all about the Pokémon trading card game. And you're listening to PTCG Radio. Now, this week we got a little couple bits of news. Match MPX is looking quite exciting. We are going to have a good look through, more of a brief look through Austrian and German nationals. And then we're going to look at the new decks that have come around from Roaring Skies. We are going to have a look at how existing decks have been changed by Roaring Skies. That's more of a next week thing. That's not something we're going to be doing this week. So starting off then this week, I'm going to start with a little plug. Go to my YouTube. Just go to YouTube and search PTCG Radio. Or Google YouTube PTCG Radio, or actually just Google PTCG Radio, you'll find the YouTube. Point is, go to my YouTube. The reason you should be going to my YouTube is very, very simple. I have started uploading videos again, very good videos again. Now, for a little while I've been trying to upload videos, I haven't had, stuff to upload. I do now. What we have is a tournament where Roaring Skies was legal, and quite frankly, it's a very, very exciting tournament because there aren't sanctioned tournaments going on where it's legal. There is a tournament in the UK going on, I think it's this coming Monday, which I think it might be in Southampton or Bournemouth or somewhere southern, suggesting that it's a league challenge, an official sanctioned tournament where Roaring Skies is legal. That can't be true because Roaring Skies is legal as of Wednesday the 27th of May. So just as a quick side note, if you go into any tournament before Wednesday the 27th of May, either Roaring Skies isn't legal or it's not an official sanctioned tournament. And there is one in the UK that I saw. I think it's Bournemouth or Southampton, somewhere southern. Maybe, I don't know, somewhere near the south, on the south coast, which is purporting to be both, and it can't. Roaring Skies is only legal as of Wednesday the 27th. So any tournament that uses that set before that date won't be an official sanctioned tournament, and you won't get championship points, etc. So, or play points for that matter. So do be very, very careful if you're planning to travel to one of them. If Roaring Skies is legal before Wednesday, the tournament ain't sanctioned. Go to my YouTube channel. Like I say, I've got round 1 up there at the moment, which shows Seismitoad Shaming versus the new Rayquaza deck. And round 2 will be going up by the time you listen to this podcast, or at least very shortly afterwards. And round 2, you're going to see a Latios deck taking on a Seismitoad deck. There we go. So a very good one. And you're going to see Groudon, Wobbuffet and all of that. Round 1's already up. Round 2's going up today. Round 3 will be up tomorrow or Friday. And then rounds 4 and 5 will be up on Saturday and Sunday. And then 3 days next week, you'll see the top 4, top 8 and final match. They're all going to be up a day or two before UK Nationals so that you can see these things in action before they start becoming legal. I'm also going to be giving you my top 10 cards of Phantom Forces at some time in the near future. And I've also, I believe, got footage from a league challenge that happened. Now, that's not going to go up till after Nationals, by which point Roaring Skies will be legal. So it's not going to be the most exciting thing in the world, a small league challenge essentially in the old format. But it's still properly commentated Pokemon games. And if you're anything like me, they're going to be entertaining for you to watch. So go check my YouTube channel, please. And if you haven't subscribed yet, why not? I'm on 925 subscribers. I am tantalizingly close to 1,000. Please make sure you go and subscribe. So in terms of new cards, there aren't that many, but there are a couple which have been revealed. So ones which are worth talking about. First, let's start with the ones that just plain ain't very good. There's Celebi, which has got, I think, Omega Stop, one of them, something like that. Prevent all effects of your opponent's Pokemon's abilities done to this Pokemon. For instance, Crawdaunt wouldn't be able to discard energy, Ninetales wouldn't be able to drag it active, nor would Genesec's Red Signal, etc. It's got an ability, Time Flip. When this Pokemon is knocked out, flip a coin. If heads, your opponent does not take a prize card, and shuffle this Pokemon and all cards attached to it into your deck. It's a fun little starter Pokemon, but it ain't great. It's a fun little Pokemon to throw out kind of at the beginning of the game because it only takes 1 energy. Oh, sorry, and it's got an attack for 1 grass energy, which is just place 1 damage counter on each of your opponent's Pokemon. Place being good because place gets around things like Mr. Mime or Carbink or things of that nature. Now, the other, it's not great, but it's kind of fun because your opponent's only got a 50% chance of KOing it. Assuming, of course, there's no Garbodor or Wobbuffet or Silent Lab, all of which would turn off Celebi's ability and just leave it to be KO'd. And it's only got 50% chance of being KO'd in something like, let's say, a Mega Gallade deck, where you're doing 30 damage to each Pokemon with damage counters on. It can be a fun little Pokemon to get damage on. It's not amazing, but I can see uses for it. And that goes for the Virizion as well. The Virizion's got for a Grass Energy, search your discard pile for 2 Pokemon and put them into your hand. It's not good enough to be an attack. Don't even think about it. The attack I'm more intrigued by is for 2 Grass Energy, 40 damage. If you've got more prize cards left than your opponent, it does 80 more damage. That's 120. Add a Muscle Band, 140. Add Laser Verbank, 170. Now, by the time this card comes out, this is going to be our August set, presumably. We don't know for a fact, but it may well be our August set. And yes, we may have rotated, and yes, laser might not be legal anymore. My theory on the rotation, and I did tweet this out earlier in the week, is very, very simple. Last year, everyone was utterly convinced that Boundaries Crossed was going to be rotated. And it wasn't. We had a different rotation. I'm not going to try and guess rotation. We ain't going to talk about it. But we're going to do what we did last year. When the rotation is announced, I am going to do a big podcast, maybe a pair of podcasts if it's going to take that long. And I'm going to go through in detail all the cards that we're losing that you should care about. And then another podcast, we're talking about which decks are going to survive or which decks are going to kind of come out because of that. There's going to be hours worth of content about the rotation. I'm going to make sure you know everything you need to know about the rotation when it happens. Until then, I'm just assuming there is going to be no rotation. Of course there probably is, but we're just going to assume. That way I'm not just... Because I saw these articles last year where people were making decks without Computer Search or Skylar, and then Computer Search and Skylar stayed in the format. It was ludicrous. So, going back to Virizion then, it can do up to 170 damage. And heck, if you replace the Muscle Band with the Silver Bangle, now you're talking 180 damage. So, there's certainly potential to get some smashing done with Virizion. It does take 2 energy. This is a card which I think would benefit from an engine we haven't really talked about very much, because it's really not very consistent, but kind of fun. Mega Turbo Energy Switch. I.e., you Mega Turbo a basic energy onto a Mega EX, attach it from the discard pile, then you play Energy Switch to get that energy from the Mega EX onto the Virizion, and then you can get it going in one turn. It can be a nice little surprise attacker. I don't think it's great, but I think there's potential. One card I love is Ace Trainer. It's a supporter. You can only play this card if you have more prize cards left than your opponent. Both players shuffle their hand into their deck, you draw 6 cards, your opponent draws 3. Love this card. It's kind of like an N, but better, because, well, assuming you're behind, of course. Now, it does suffer from what I'm going to refer to as Colress syndrome, or teammates, or twins, or whatever you want. That being if it's the only supporter in your hand at the beginning of the game, you've got to wait to play it. You can't play Colress, well, you can play Colress with no bench Pokemon, but that would be stupid. So, you've got to be careful with this. But similarly, it's kind of... essentially, any deck that's going to go behind uses this. The most obvious example I can think of off the top of my head is Groudon Wobbuffet. You're going to lose a Wobbuffet before you get your Groudons up and rolling. Ace Trainer's going to be brilliant when that happens. You put your opponent down to 3 cards, yourself up to 6, and off you go. Now, with things like Shaming in the format, using setup to draw until you've got 6 cards in your hand when you bench it... Yes, Enning and things like this are going to become less relevant. There's going to be more ways to draw out of it. But still, you're going to have to do so. And that's, you're still going to have plenty of games where your opponent draws dead. The other and the last of the 4 cards, which I think is moderately interesting. Celebi, by the way, is what you get when you buy a booster box. So it may well be our pre-release promo. We've had a few pre-release promos that have been the Japanese promo for buying the booster box. And all the other cards are from Bandit Ring. So again, we can assume these are going to be in our August set. I like Machamp PX. It's got 2 attacks, 180 HP, weak to Psychic, like you'd expect. The first attack, Fighting Colorless, 20 damage times the number of damage counters on this Pokemon. 9 damage, On him, 180 damage. Essentially, it deals twice as much damage as is on him. And let's not forget, there's things like Rainbow Energy and Frozen City that you can use to damage yourself. Rainbow Energy does 10 damage when you attach. Frozen City does 20 damage when you attach an energy to a non-plasma Pokemon. So that straight away would leave you doing 60 damage. 180 damage is not all... I mean, some decks will be able to do it, but against something like Seismitoad, this could pack a punch if you can keep your energy on there. Biggest problem with this, it's a non-Mega EX, it takes 2 energy to attack, and fighting still doesn't have great acceleration. Even the non-EX Landorus isn't very good. There's a reason Groudon is only really good now, because it's got Mega Turbo. That's all I'm going to say. Second, it confuses you when you do that. Something that some people have suggested, there's that new Heavy Boots card or whatever it's called, which increases your HP by 20, stops you being able to be confused, and increases your retreat cost by 3. Machamp's already got a retreat cost of 3, so you're going to switch it or escape rope out. So that would be useful to not confuse him. However, and it would then mean you got 200 HP, and in fact, you would then max out at 380 damage rather than 340. Because you could take 19 damage counters, not 17, before you got KO'd. The second attack, Crazy Hammer, 2 fighting and a colourless, 80 damage. If you're affected by a special condition, it does 80 more and remove the special conditions. Good if you're affected by laser. And also, to be honest, there's clear synergy with the first attack. Of course, you have got the whole confusion flip, and you can't sort that with something like Fliptini, because it's not a flip for the attack, it's a flip for the status condition. Flip Tails, 30 damage to you. Flip Heads, 180 damage with a Muscle Band, 160 without. That is pretty good. There is potential here for Machamp, but as I find myself saying far too often with a fighting Pokemon, you haven't got good enough energy acceleration, and until you do, it's not going to be all that and a bag of potato chips. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, to let you down with that news. Now, I want to have a quick chat about German and Austrian nationals results. However, the reality is, and I'm sorry if this upsets anyone, but these results now are not terribly exciting or important. And I mean no disrespect or offence when I say that. What I mean very simply is, we are, as I record this, exactly 1 week away from Roaring Skies being legal, which means there's only one more weekend where they can possibly run tournaments where these decks are going to be legal. For the vast majority of people, their nationals are going to be played with Roaring Skies being legal, and that's what we're really interested in, these new decks. So again, no disrespect to anyone else. I'm going to talk about these results, but bear in mind they're going to be historical results very soon. Let's not forget, of course, that I'm going to be, after nationals, uploading a league challenge where Roaring Skies wasn't legal. So, if we start off then with, let's start with Austrian Nats. Now, I'm assuming these are in order. I believe this is correct. So, the winner was Metal. And Metal's gotten good. People have realised how to build it. You've got Edgeslash, which allows you to ward off attacks from Pokemon with special energy attached. Cobalion EX to get rid of special energy. Dialga EX to do 170 with Muscle Band. And people are getting nice, consistent lists going. Second place, we had, and indeed, there was a top 4 as well. Second and fourth, we had Seismitoad Slurpuff, exactly as you would be expecting. It plays Seismitoad and Slurpuff, it draws a huge amount of cards, and it plays Verbank and Laser, and it plays Enhanced Hammer, and it plays Crushing Hammer. And you can see the entire lists. There's a thing that's doing around, webpage, I might tweet it out if I remember, but they're both playing 4 Crushing Hammer, they're both playing Xerosic, they're both playing Cassius, they're both playing a single Enhanced Hammer and all of this rubbish. It's a similar kind of list. They poison you and they hammer off all of your energy, and it's depressing. And the other deck that made the top 4 was a Flareon deck, and Flareon, again, we've talked about before. You've got Flareon just as a general attacker, you've got Leafeon to take down Seismitoad, you've got Glaceon to give you free retreat, and then the only other real attacker you're going to be playing is Empoleon, which you have to get out using Archie's Ace in the Hole, but then is a very good, efficient attacker for 1 water energy. It's a complicated deck that attacks in a very straightforward manner. What I mean by that is, you're playing a Ditto, you're playing Deoxys, you're playing Jirachi, you're playing Mr. Mime, you're playing Execute, you're playing Aldino, you're playing all different evolutions, you're playing Archie's Ace in the Hole and all of that. But when it comes down to it, you've got Flareon, Leafeon, and Polion. They are your attackers. So, very interesting, you can... I'm assuming that... David, the Flareon player, I'm assuming he lost to the Seismitoad, not to the Bronzong in the final, because you'd want to play the Bronzong in the final if you were playing Flareon. Which happened at German Nationals. The winner of German Nationals was a chap called David playing Flareon in what looks like an identical list, at least very, very similar. And second was a lovely chap called Niklas, who fantastically went undefeated all through Swiss, went undefeated all the way until the final, and then unfortunately lost in the final because Bronzong playing against Flareon is not a particularly good matchup, unfortunately. Pretty different list. He played no Cobalion EX, because Cobalion EX has got the attack does 30 damage and discards a special energy for one metal, and also it does 100 damage for free energy, and it goes through effects like Safeguard. He didn't have anything for Safeguard other than Bronzong itself, and honestly it didn't seem to have a huge problem. Safeguarders, he apparently wasn't worried, and, Safeguarders are not seeing a lot of play. Although, coming on next week's podcast, why Safeguarders really are something that should be played. One of the things I'm going to do next week is my top techs for Nationals, along with how the current decks are being affected by the new cards. Rounding out the top four, we had a Mega Gardevoir deck, which, given that I know friend of the podcast Alex Hill went and won one of the regionals this past weekend in the US with Mega Gardevoir, it's clearly a deck which has some legs at the moment when built and played properly. And rounding out the top four, we had Carl Peters, who I played at Worlds one year, and won in one of the luckiest games I've ever played and really didn't deserve to win, with Seismitoad Slurpuff. Going into top 8, top 8, I'm assuming it's top 8, was rounded out by two Crobat decks, one playing Mewtwo, one playing Landorus, a Night March deck, and another Seismitoad Slurpuff. So to be honest, everything we should be expecting. Night March is still good against EX heavy decks, but not great against Seismitoad. Seismitoad was, officially, Seismitoad was 2 of the top 8 decks. But then the Bronzong deck that Niklas took to second place played 2 Seismitoad. And the Mewtwo Crobat really was Seismitoad Crobat now that I look at it. So, you're talking kind of 3.5 of the top 8 decks were Seismitoad. Seismitoad is clearly amazing. So, nice and simple. Exactly, basically what we would be expecting from those tournaments. Seismitoad is still amazing. Evil Tower has completely fallen out of favour because of decks like Seismitoad and Night March. Night March is a fringe deck. Flareon's good if you play it properly. The only real surprise was how well Metal and Mega Gardevoir did, but they are decks that have always had the potential to be amazing if a good list is played by a good player. So it's something you really kind of should be expecting at this stage, because we've had them out long enough that the lists now are fantastic. So, the main focus of today, and what I want to finish on, because I've just recorded the commentary for round 5 of this Roaring Skies legal tournament, and I'm literally recording the podcast while I let that render, and then I'm going to go back and record the top 8 game. Essentially, I'm trying to rush all of these videos out before Nationals, and I need at some point to do the top 10 cards of Phantom Forces. Roaring Skies, spoiler alert, Shaman's number 1. You shouldn't expect anything less. At least I'm going to get number 1 right this time, I hope. If anything in the set turns out better than Shaman, I will be concerned for the health of the game. So, lots of content, so please do go and check out my YouTube channel. I'm going to push it because I spend a lot of time and effort putting the stuff up on YouTube. It's stuff I think you'll appreciate, so yeah, I'm going to keep telling you about it. So moving into the new decks from Roaring Skies, there are basically 4 which I think merit talking about today. Now, the first one is Rayquaza Shaming, and honestly, we're not going to talk very much about Rayquaza Shaming. I've said it all. Just in very brief outline, you've got the new colourless Rayquaza and Mega Rayquaza. The Mega Rayquaza has both Spirit Link and Delta Evolution, meaning you can evolve it the turn you put it down without ending your turn. It takes free energy to attack, but that can be done with 1 Mega Turbo and 1 double colourless energy. It does 30 times the number of bench Pokemon you have, and you can use the Stadium Sky Field to have up to 8 bench Pokemon. You've also got the supporter Winona, which allows you to search for your Rayquaza and Mega Rayquaza, as well as your Shaming, which when you bench it has got the ability set up so you can draw until you've got 6 cards in your hand. What that means, ladies and gentlemen, is this deck is crazy good, except, and I think I could be wrong, this is I've been doing the podcast now for 3 years. This is the 4th Nationals for which I will be running this podcast, and I've called it every year. I believe I've called the winner of UK Nationals every year. I never played the deck that I predicted would win, which is stupid. But I'm not playing this year, so that's all good. I don't think Rayquaza's going to win Nationals. I don't think it's that good against Travelin, and I don't think it's that good against Shaming, Seismitoad, and I think it struggles against Groudon. And they're going to be probably my top 3 decks. I think there will be an awful lot of people that take Rayquaza to their Nationals because they've tested against their mates. And this is one of the reasons I'm so keen to upload these videos to my YouTube channel about this Roaring Skies tournament. There are an awful lot of people that are testing with their mates. And when you test with your mates, you get to see your deck against your mates' decks and your mates' build of particular decks. You're not, you might think I beat Rayquaza every time, or I beat Seismitoad every time, and then somebody comes out of a slightly different build, and then all of a sudden you're not beating it every time. You are, in fact, rarely beating it, and that could potentially be a little bit of a problem. So the Rayquaza deck for me has one fundamental problem, and it's going to be hard to explain, so bear with me. If you make a super fast version, it's got a whole boatload of problems. If you don't make the super fast version, then it might be too slow to be effective. So let me take that step by step. Let's say you make the super fast Rayquaza version. Well, you're not going to play Altaria, the stage 1 that also has Delta Evolution, so you can evolve it on turn 1 of the game, or the turn it goes down. Which means you've got Lightning Weakness. Which means any deck that plays Raichu or Manectric is going to run through your completely Lightning Weak deck incredibly fast. So now you've got a glaring weakness to lightning-based decks. You can put Altaria in, but the more Altaria, even if it's a 1-1 list, the more Altaria you put into your deck, the less consistent your deck gets. That's a problem. Not only that, but the only Pokemon you've got in your deck, in a general list, are going to be Rayquaza and Shaming. Well, what if a Safeguard Pokemon goes down? Something like your Suicune, or your Scizor EX, or what's the other one I'm trying to think of? The psychic one. Sigilyph, there we go. All of these are going to stop you attacking and basically win the game there and then. And you're not playing laser and trumping it all back in like a Seismitoad deck would against a Safeguarder. You've actually got to take them out. Yes, if you're playing against someone stupid that benches a bunch of other stuff, you can Lysandra around the Safeguarder. But if you're playing against any half-decent player, they're just going to attach energy to the Safeguarder and win. That's not good. Not only that, but you're then kind of susceptible to Crushing Hammer and Enhanced Hammer, as you kind of always would be. So you need to kind of get around the whole Lightning Weak problem and the Safeguard problem. So you put in Altaria, and then you put in an Execute list, an Execute line, because you're already going to be Executor line, because you're already going to be playing Execute. You're already going to be playing Execute just by virtue of, the fact that you need to be able to propagate, to put on the bench, to have more Pokemon on the bench for Skyfield. And now the problems are starting to multiply, because now you're putting so much in your deck you're not fast enough. So either you're going to have glaring problems, or you're going to end up too slow to do what you want to do. And that's the biggest fundamental problem with Rayquaza. Not only that, but with all this reliance on Mega Turbo and Spirit Link and draw trainers, you are susceptible to Trainer Lock, especially if they're playing Xerasic or Team Flare Grunt or Crushing Hammer or Enhanced Hammer to start getting rid of your energy, especially if they play Headringer as well. And with all this reliance on Shaming, then you are going to be susceptible to Ability Lock. Either Wobbuffet or Silent Lab are going to be the number one choices for this. And now it's just full of glaring problems. I think people are going to play it at Nationals. I think it's going to do well. I think people are going to top cut with it. Because it is a fundamentally strong deck. It's fast, it's consistent, it's hard hitting. What I'm saying is, if it comes up against a decent list with Wobbuffet, or it comes up against a good Seismitoad list, or a good Travelin list, or a good Manectric list, or a good Raichu list, it could easily fail. People are going to slip through and get into cut, but I really don't see this winning Nationals. So that's enough on that. We've talked about this deck to high heaven. So let's talk about some ones that we haven't talked about much on the podcast. Starting off with our old friend Seismitoad. Now, some people have been suggesting, yay, new set, Seismitoad's not going to be as good. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, I think Seismitoad could well end up winning Nationals, whatever country you're in. I think a lot of people are going to be unprepared for Seismitoad. I was. Now, don't get me wrong. It's an obvious combination. We've been using Slurpluff with Seismitoad, and I know I keep pronouncing that Pokemon wrong. I do apologise. People have been playing Seismitoad Slurpluff, and it's been really, really good. And it's been winning a lot of tournaments, and it's been doing extremely well everywhere. Biggest problem is it's a little bit slow, because you've got to get Slurpluff out. And especially early game, you kind of let your opponent set up. That's why decks like Fairies and Bronzong have been actually fairly good against it, because you're no longer playing Garbodor to get rid of their abilities. And what you're basically doing is going through and, you're giving them a couple turns to set up, and then they're off. And then they're one-hitting you, and then you lose. You can make big comebacks with it, but you essentially cut down on the number of supporters you're playing to make way for the Slurpuff line, I should say. And until you get your first Slurpuff, then your deck can be a little bit slow. Until you see a good Seismitoad Shaming list in action, I don't think you're going to realise quite how good it is. It's crazy. You can run through, and we saw I just recorded round 5, the commentary for, of this tournament, and we see Ryan Morehouse. He plays through one game, and he must go through 2/3 of his deck in one turn. You play Super Scoop Up and Scoop Up Cyclone to reuse your Shaming, and you play Crushing Hammer, and you play Enhanced Hammer, and you play Headring, and you play Startling Megaphone. I watched in top 8, and this is a video that wasn't recorded, so no spoilers. I watched Luke Kirkham's Rayquaza against Ryan Morehouse's Seismitoad in top 8. And Luke took the first game, or Luke took one of the games, and the reason he took the game was he got set up, Ryan couldn't get rid of his energy, he ran through 3 Seismitoads very quickly. In the other 2 games, it felt like Ryan was hitting every heads, but if you actually sat and looked, Ryan was hitting about 1 in 3 heads. The problem was, every turn, he was playing 2 or 3 Super Scoop Up, 2 or 3 Crushing Hammer. There was one turn where Luke had 4 energy on a Rayquaza, and you only need 3 in order to do the attack, but Luke knew that he was going to get rid of some energy. In one turn, not only did Ryan get rid of all 4 energy, 2 Crushing Hammers, 1 Enhanced Hammer, but he played a Startling Megaphone to get rid of the Spirit Link and then put a Headringer on there. So Luke went from needing 4 energy and having 3, needing 3 energy and having 4, to needing 4 energy, needing 4 energy and having none. And then he just lost the game. People aren't going to be... A lot of people are saying things like, well, got Virizion, 2 energy and I'll take it out. Or, yeah, but I'm playing Manectric, and as soon as I've got 2 energy on Manectric, I'm just building up my bench with more energy anyway. And that is absolutely true. If you ever get 2 energy on Virizion or Manectric. But if you add in the Startling Megaphone Headringer combo and all the Crushing Hammers, you might never get 2 energy on there. Now, don't get me wrong, some games you will. But heed my warning, ladies and gentlemen. Be prepared for Seismitoad decks that can get rid of all of your energy every turn. Because it's not going to happen every game. But it can happen. You need a way around it. One thing you could potentially try, especially if you're playing a Stage 1 deck, Put a 1-1 Travelin line in. Just a 1-1 line. Trainer lock them while you get yourself set up. Something that can be tried. But trust me when I say this deck it's a devastating deck. I mean, it's also stupid. It's utterly, ridiculously stupid. Because, I mean, it's just fast. You're now getting going on turn 1 most of the time. You know, and they're drawing, people are drawing 30, 40 cards a turn. And let's not forget that while they're getting rid of all your energy, they're basically hitting a laser every turn they want to. Now, it can occasionally struggle to find energy because it's only playing 4. And if it can't get a Seismitoad turn 1, then it can struggle. Other than that, it's an amazing deck. But it has 2 glaring weaknesses. And it's not really just weakness anymore because it can get rid of energy so much. I'd honestly put it at least 50-50 with Virizion. Because Virizion was always a case of, well, if I can hit my head ringers and crushing hammers, then I'm going to stop the Memorable Slashing and I'm going to win. And that is so much more likely now than it ever used to be. Trainer lock and ability lock. Seismitoad hates Wobbuffet. Wobbuffet's really good because you're essentially not playing many supporters, and the reason you're not playing many supporters is you're drawing all your cards with Shaming, and you're using Super Scoop Up and Scoop Up Cyclone to reuse your Shaming to draw even more cards. And then a Wobbuffet comes out, Wobbuffet being, if it's active, then you can't use any abilities on non-psychic Pokemon. Now you can Lysandre around it, so you can Lysandre something else active that isn't Wobbuffet, and then you get your abilities back. If you've got a Lysandre in hand, and even if you do, you then can't use any other supporter to try and draw more cards in the one turn where you've actually got your Shamans available to use. The other problem is Trainer Lock. And I'm not going to spoil the result, but round 5, as I keep mentioning, is between a Trevenant... Well, I don't keep mentioning what it's about, but I keep mentioning round 5. Is between Trevenant Shaman and Seismitoad Shaman. And have a look at that game when it goes up on my YouTube channel. Yeah, I'm going to keep plugging it because I'm spending hours recording these videos. You'll notice how much Seismitoad tends to struggle. It's not just the fact that it now can't play Crushing Hammer, can't play Enhanced Hammer, can't play Laser, etc., but it relies on Shaman to draw through its deck. And Shaman draws until you've got 6 cards in your hand. So if you've got a handful of cards, you're not going to be able to bench Shaman to draw more. It really is a worrying thing for Seismitoad decks. So Seismitoad decks are awesome, but they struggle against Trainer Lock and they struggle against Ability Lock. While we're on Trainer Lock, let's talk about Trevenant. Now, I've seen Trevenant Shaman on YouTube and other things. I saw people posting videos of it, and I was severely unimpressed. Ooh, you're hitting for 50 a turn and Trainer Locking me. It's not the end of the world. And then I saw Scott Burgess, the current UK national champion, play Trevenant when I played against him round 1 this past weekend. I'm not going to go through my tournament. I played a pretty Roaring Skies Donphan list, hoping to play against Big EX decks. And in short, I played against a Trevenant and got stomped, a Seismitoad and got stomped, which I should because I'm playing a speed trainer-based deck. I played against a Rayquaza Dragon and won, which I should because the prize trade is way in my favour. 5 energy, discarding 2 to do 200 damage. I'm fine with it, or 300 damage, whatever it is. I'm fine with that because you're knocking out a Robo-Sub. And I played against a Manectric Landorus deck, which I beat, which again I should because the prize trade's in my favour. Other than that, I had one draw, and my draw was against my good friend Charlie Powell. He was playing Mewtwo Bats. And game 1, we both drew dead, and just before Zubat wing attacked my Phanpy to death, I wish I was joking, I top-decked a Donphan for the win. And then in game 2, he hit 5 out of 5 Super Scoop-Ups. He didn't miss a single one, and I lost by 1 prize. It happens. So we ended up drawing that game overall. So I ended up 2-2-1. It was a bad call of deck. It was not the deck I should have been playing. I should have gone Manectric as I was planning on, but I wanted one more run with Donphan. But yeah, I probably would have made cut with 3-2. It was only about 20 people and we went for a top 8. If you think that's uncompetitive, watch the videos and look at the kind of players we're getting there. dude who got 13th at Worlds last year, UK national champion. I think about a third of the field already have their Worlds invites this year. So it was a small but competitive field. But, these things happen. Had I beaten Charlie, maybe I'd get into Top Cup. Then I would have just been stomped by one of, the many Seismitoads. So it really didn't matter like that. But that's not the way you play Trevenant. The way you play Trevenant is you attack with Trevenant. Psychic and a double colourless does 60 and 20 damage to each of 2 bench Pokemon. 80, 20, 20 if you pop a Muscle Band on. Add Verbank Laser, and this builds up quickly. You can use Wally to evolve Phantom into Trevenant on turn 1 and get turn 1 Trainer Lock. You can go first and have your opponent never play trainers. Now, like Wobbuffet, Trevenant only affects when active, so your opponent can Lysandre something else from the bench and, buy themselves a turn of trainers, but then in their only turn of trainers, they've used their supporter, so it's going to limit what they can do with those trainers. So that's quite handy. What they really want to do is play a bunch of trainers, Juniper play a bunch of trainers. They can't do that if they've already played their supporter for the turn. So something to bear in mind there. And it really is as simple as that. You use Shaman to draw into stuff, and you use energy denial cards. I'm going to give you a tip, ladies and gentlemen. No, actually, I'm going to do a shameless plug. Watch round 5. It's very obvious one kind of or couple of cards that they're using. In Trainer Lock decks, there is one thing you need to be playing nowadays. And if you watch round 5 of that tournament from Roaring Skies, which will be on my YouTube channel, round 5 will probably be up Sunday, you will learn the cards you need to pop in there. And the final deck to mention this week is Groudon Wobbuffet. Groudon is now good. I saw Corey Kirkham take this deck to top 8 at the weekend, and honestly, if he hadn't had to play Flareon in top 8, he might well have ended up winning the whole tournament. The deck's just amazing. Essentially, it plays like Groudon always has. You build Mega Groudon or Primal Groudon up on the bench, you smash. There are 3 things that really make this deck good. Thing number 1 is the fact that Primal Groudon, not only does it hit for 200, but it has Omega Barrier. That means that as soon as you Primal Evolve, and there's always going to be one turn before you Primal Evolve, because he doesn't have Delta Evolution, because he has Omega Barrier, you can't be Lysandre'd up, you can't be Catchered up, you can't be Lasered, you can't have Crushing Hammer or Enhanced Hammer, or Xerasic, or Team Flare Grunt getting rid of your energy. And then, while you're attacking with the first Primal Groudon, you can just use, or even after, use Mega Turbo to get the second Primal Groudon up quickly. The problem why Primal Groudon was never amazing was you could usually get the first one up, but when it went down, you hadn't had a chance to build up 2 Primal Groudons. Now, with Mega Turbo, you do. See last week's podcast for more information about Mega Turbo. But the third thing that really makes it good is Wobbuffet. Wobbuffet is now brilliant. It's awesome. Because what Wobbuffet does is it turns off abilities. Like, for instance, Shaming. Your opponent is going to struggle to get set up while you're sitting there behind Wobbuffet. You leave Wobbuffet active, your opponent doesn't have abilities, and you get built up on the bench. And if you're wondering why Groudon Wobbuffet wasn't amazing beforehand, we are now in a Shaming world. The thing with Shaming is you don't really have a choice. If you are, essentially, if you're not playing Shaming, and your opponent has a faster deck. And in the less skill-intensive, faster format we're in at the moment, then the faster deck often wins. The only way to counter this is to have a counter to it. So every deck is either going to play Shaming, or it's going to play something like Wobbuffet or Silent Lab to stop Shaming. If you're playing against one of those, you're probably going to have time to build up your Groudons. If you're playing against someone that plays Shaming, Wobbuffet is amazing. I love Groudon Wobbuffet. Now, it is slightly dodgy against, say, the new Rayquaza deck, because the new Rayquaza deck is hella fast, and when you bring up your first Groudon, well, in the time you build up a Groudon, they can build up a couple of Mega Rayquazas on the bench. So when your first Groudon attacks, they're going to have a Rayquaza to beat you down. And when it comes into an I'm one-hitting you, you're one-hitting me contest, they're faster than you. So it might struggle against a new Rayquaza deck. But remember, the new Rayquaza deck relies on Shaming to get set up, so you can severely slow them down with Wobbuffet. It's only when you start attacking and take Wobbuffet out the active that they're going to get really, really fast. But it's amazing against Seismitoad Shaming because Wobbuffet goes active and they just run out of steam. It's pretty good against Travelin because, again, as soon as you've got one Groudon going, you can just sit there and smash them. If I was playing Nationals this year, I was thinking Manectric. Now, honestly, and I'm not saying it's the best deck in the format, I'm not saying it's my pick for Nationals, but I'm saying if I was going to play in Nationals, it would be my pick for me. I'd be playing Groudon Wobbuffet. Mostly because I just love to sit there and laugh at people trying to bench their Shaming. And then not letting them take it back unless they were my friend. Because, pay attention. And that, ladies and gentlemen, those are the new decks from Roaring Skies that you should be aware of. As always, any questions, hit me up on Twitter at the Wassy or by email at ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk. Make sure that you check out my YouTube channel. Last little plug, PTCG Radio on YouTube. I'm spending a lot of time doing up these videos from Roaring Skies, and honestly, if you go into Nationals and want to know about this set, I would highly recommend going and watching these videos because you're seeing the new decks that you'll be seeing at Nationals, and for some people, especially people in the UK, there really isn't a huge amount of testing time before Nationals comes around. And obviously, if you disagree with anything or you think I've missed any decks, let me know. There are other decks like the new Shedinja deck, but honestly, I don't think they're going to be good enough. We might have a chat about them next week if we've got time. We've talked about them before. Essentially, Shedinja, use Wally to get him going turn 1, 50 damage times the damage counters on them. So you use Mew to copy the attack after using Wally to get it out on the bench. You pop an energy on Mew, which is a rainbow energy, with Frozen City out. Mew has 30 damage on, you do 150, Muscle Band does 170, life is good. It's 120 HP EX, it's not really going to be good enough over the course of a long tournament. One or two people might do okay with it, but it's not going to be good overall. Next week, we are going to be talking about the existing decks, which I suppose by then will be the old decks. Things like Mega Gardevoir, Bronzong, Flareon, etc. And we're going to be talking about whether they're viable for Nationals. I'm also going to give you my tip for Nationals, what I think is going to win, and I'm going to be telling you my top techs for Nationals, cards that you really should try and fit into your deck if you've got a little bit of room. And that will pretty much do it for this week. As always, thank you very much for listening. Let me know if you need any help with Nationals, etc. I will give advice as and when I can. Look after yourselves till next week. My name's Ross, and you've been listening to PTCG Radio.